we're going to go fucking live. Now we're fucking live, right? Now we're fucking live. All right. We're fucking live. We're fucking live now, okay? So this is how Anthony lost 34 pounds, and we're going to be talking about how he went from having a dad bod to visible abs. My man, Anthony Conigliaro, thank you for joining us here today. How are we doing today?
I'm great, man. I'm great.
My man, awesome. Anthony, I'd like for us to kick off in this way. Could you share with everybody a bit more about who you are, what your background is, and how we connected?
Sure. So I've been on my fitness journey for years. Like a typical kid in Brooklyn. I started going into gym, Dolphin Fitness, back in 2000.
Hey, shout out Dolphin Fitness.
Went throughout high school, through and through throughout the years. As I got older, just like anybody else, people stopped putting on the weight. I got to an all-time high a few years back of like 225 pounds. I noticed when I was on vacation. My uncle snapped a picture of me at the barbecue, and I looked at myself. I was like, "Holy shit!" And I got on the scale that night. It was my first night on vacation. 225 pounds. I said, "I'm going on a diet." I didn't even realize I got that big. I did some research at the time. Jumped into intermittent fasting, just lifting 3 days a week, stuff like that, and I was able to shed down 55 pounds. Got down to a solid 179, skinny as hell. Pandemic hit, and just like anybody else's life, kind of fishtail went sideways. And as soon as I realized that wasn't sustainable, I gained the majority of that weight back. And before I knew it, I was 220 pounds again. I started trying to get back on my own grind, and just following through Instagram, I stumbled upon a couple of previous teachers I had in high school. One being the legend, Deacon Mac. Who I saw dropped 100 pounds, and I was like, "Holy crap, this guy looks great!" And then one of my religion teachers, Brooklyn's own Sally T, is in Tenervia, and I looked at him, and he's like 40-something years old. I'm like, this guy's had abs. Like, what the hell are you doing? And I reached out to him. And he said, "Do you know Ursula?" I was like, "No." I was like, "Is he younger than me?" He's not in my class. So he put me on. He kind of just gave me the ins and outs. Told me, follow the program. It wasn't too intrusive. It's really sustainable. And give him a call. And then I booked a call with Urs. Wasn't what I expected. Shaking, sitting there, like he's throwing all these crazy numbers at me. My anxiety's kicking in. I can't commit. I'm working 2-3 jobs. I'm trying to clear up debt. I'm like, I can't afford this. And he kind of just calmed me down, talked me through it, and we came up with a plan that worked for us. And we started from there. We hit the ground running. Set me up with a fundamental plan. Talked about what my goals were, what we wanted to do. I still had my trials and tribulations along the way. But in the last 3-4 months, I really kicked it up a notch and was able to really shed down 35 pounds. Started with Ursula at 214. Currently weighed in this morning at 180 pounds. I don't think I've had as good as a physique thus far. I'm definitely more muscular than I've ever have been. People are stopping me who are like close friends and family. I haven't seen them in a while. They're like, "What the hell did you do? You look amazing," and stuff like that. So definitely developed discipline, learned some new things for sure, created a more sustainable lifestyle for myself. And he's even motivated me to start my own business, to try to do the same. So definitely has made a real culture change for me in my life, my career, and just my perspective on life and how I want to move forward and be the person who I want to be.
Damn, bro. That was like the most efficient 3 minutes introduction I've ever heard anyone give ever. You get a 11 out of 10, A++. That was phenomenal. Phenomenal. Go on. What are you going to say?
No, by all means. I mean, public speaking is not something I'm afraid of. One of my old jobs, really, they put us on the spot. I used to talk in front of 30, 40 people, all the time. So I was and you get more and more comfortable, but it's just being vulnerable. You're telling your truth. You're telling your story, right? And
absolutely.
If you're ashamed of who you are and ashamed of your story, and you can't be comfortable in your own skin to tell the rest of everybody else, because there's other people in your skin too who feel the same way that you do, and they want to be where you are. I think that a lot of the time, a lot of people they take that for granted, because it's cliche. It's like one of those Instagram apps, but you prayed for the things you have now one day in the past. And I think that, those things kind of, once you hit your goals, those things kind of go out the window, but it's always advisable to stay humble and never forget where you came from. And just that knowledge you gain to get what you know, just share with people who are not behind you, but people who are, desiring to be where you are today.
I love that, man. Dude, bro, holy crap. What a different human being you are right now in a good way from like the person I talked to last year. I had to like
that video, bro.
I wish I would have recorded our conversation, bro, because man, I felt like could you share with everybody your biggest like moment of when you took that leap of faith and like kind of shared with you like what you want is on the other side of the sphere?
At that moment, I was just scared. I guess, for me, I've always been independent, and sometimes we don't always, account for your finances, and you just spend money on things that you don't always, intend to. And when you make an investment in yourself, sometimes they're bigger than others, but you can't look at the investment as a sinking ship. In the current moment, you got to think of the bigger picture in the long term, like what you're going to get out of it. It's the same thing as if when you're going to college, or you're putting a down payment on a house, or it's anything long term. It's I think that a lot of times people are afraid to make the jump because um, it's the fear factor of the negative, like what's going to come out of it, like how they're not going to succeed. They don't look at the positive things. Um, Meanwhile, just working through that fear, you're only a couple of steps away from where you truly want to be. And I think that's really important just for people to realize. There's actually a quote that I stumbled upon. I'm a big fan of the Wu-Tang Clan. One of their main guys, his name is the RZA, and he has a quote. He says, "Fear is a state of nervousness only fit for children." So,
Woo. Dropping bombs.
This is the best interview you're gonna get.
Oh my gosh, it already is. It already is. And I know we have a time cap too, so it's gonna be the most efficient and the best at the same time.
But yeah, I think that any successful person that you aspire to be and who you look up to, or they have the things that you want, I think they've gone through all these motions. Whether it's materialistic things or just independent goals or self goals or anything you want, somebody's already accomplished and been through. And everybody's always going to have self doubt. It's an inevitable process of life. People have anxieties that sometimes you don't even realize you have. Sometimes you don't even realize you have anxiety, and they're just built in you from like generational habit, or just things you don't realize until you get through at an older age. And it's how you work through those things. I feel like your mentality and your perspective and your mental health is something that needs to be nurtured and grown and watered on a day-to-day basis. And those things are everything. Your mind is a garden. If you water the weeds, weeds will grow. But if you water the seeds, you're going to get flowers. So what you feed your mind on a day-to-day basis is going to be the outcome of what your future is going to be. I used to not read. That wasn't a big thing for me. But I'm a big follower of Andy Frisella. I've never really accomplished 75 hard. I've gotten pretty deep into it. But one of his tasks on a day-to-day was read 10 pages a day. So I started getting into reading over time. And there's a lot of different things on self-development that I've really enjoyed reading over the past few years. But those things have pushed me and motivated me on a day-to-day basis just to be the best version of myself.
Yeah, man. I mean, like, you got to feed the body. You got to feed the mind. We were earlier before we got on here talking about feeding the spirit, right? Like you were mentioning how I was getting baptized yesterday and going to church, things like that. Could you actually share, where were you mentally, emotionally, physically, like before the program?
I was at an awkward place, I guess, per se. Like I was where I wanted to be in my career, but just going through a lot of interpersonal things in life. Just had recently at 28 and 29 years old, I realized I developed like anxiety, where sometimes I'd like have panic attacks and go into full shutdown mode and stuff like that. That never used to happen to me in the past. So like things would trigger me now or in old age, I would never phase me in the past. So just learning how to like cope with certain things and just going through the motions on a day-to-day basis was something new for me. And sometimes it was just like the lack of um, uh, the self development that I wasn't putting in. I wasn't putting in the work on a day to day basis. I was just sitting back and wait, hoping for the best and hoping things will change. But things don't change if things don't change, right? Like if you're not consistently putting in the work on a day to day basis to nurture yourself, then you're never going to grow. Not to say never, but these are inevitable factors of people progressing in life. Period. Um, so
Yeah. No, absolutely. There's a quote that I love from Tony Robbins. He says,
my
uh, "What's that?"
my guy Tony
Yeah,
Robbins.
he's my guy too, man. He says change is constant, right? Everything's changing, but progress is not. And that progress is what helps us feel that aliveness and that feel that like momentum. You know what? One thing I would like to hear from you, Anthony, is you were mentioning about mental health. How has this program helped you in that area, if any way?
Um, for sure, discipline. I think that they're along this program. They require critical tasks on a day-to-day basis, and they're not the toughest things in the world. The simplest one is tracking your food, and for some people, like that's like the hardest task in the world. I've had numerous people tell me, I don't want to do math to eat," and I'm just looking at them like, it's a process, right? You develop that discipline on a day to day because if you're not tracking those foods, um, or just tracking your steps or just getting those analytics together, you don't know if you're actually doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you're not going to make that progress, right? So definitely developed a discipline, but where you develop discipline in one place in your life, you develop discipline in other places in your life, and it just pays dividends through and through. You create more, end up having more energy, and you're more motivated to act in other areas in your life where you might be, not as efficient, or you may not be the best version of yourself. Um, and it completely just transforms who you are as an individual.
Could you talk more about that? Like, how has this positively impacted other areas of your life outside of just your health? Well, not just, but you know what I'm trying to say, outside of your health and fitness.
Um, I've definitely gained some self confidence back where I didn't have any. I've definitely been more motivated to take on things in my life that I've not common with. I've been in healthcare for 10 years. I just left my job in healthcare to jump into a career in sales, which is something completely parallel for me. But it's something that interests me. It's something that um,
Did you make that jump? You left your job already?
I start in a couple weeks.
Dude, congratulations. That's freaking amazing.
Yeah, so I'm going to start completely new job, working in sales, healthcare sales, in the next couple of weeks, which is similar but completely different. And there's just so many things I don't know. And at this point, if I would have did this where I started, with that fear factor in the middle, I would have already been panicking, like I'm not going to make it because I don't know what I'm doing. But like here, I'm sitting here more optimistic of how I'm going to approach it, getting in there, so that way I have a smooth transition. Um, and I'm have a more sort of more systematic approach of how I'm going to just take this on, just so I can be the best version of myself and um, learn as much as I can and be a sponge.
I love that, man. Dude, congratulations. That's awesome. And Anthony, what are some things that you've tried in the past? I know you mentioned about the intermittent fasting. On a call we had a couple of weeks ago, I also learned from you that you work with a trainer at some point as well. Could you maybe talk about the experiences you've had in the past working with like a trainer as an example versus what you've experienced having us as a coach, or me as a coach rather?
I have a trainer in. I've had trainers in like local gyms and stuff like that. You get X amount of sessions, but I guess it wasn't as consistent with like diets and following up and stuff like that. I mean, there'd be chatting along with the workout, but there isn't that accountability factor, I guess, per se, that we had here, because this is more a personal interaction between a coach and an individual. I feel like every trainer should aspire to be a coach. They're trying to, create those people to be the best versions of themselves as they are. Um, but I think for sure, I think the main thing was the accountability factor. There have been times along the way where you slump, and I think through the app and the way that you track all the data analytics, it's easy to tell if somebody's just lying to themselves or cheating themselves. If you're doing the work and you put in the progress photos, etc., and you're really not making the progress, you cheat yourself. At the end of the day, you're spiting yourself. But a personal training on a one-to-one, you don't get that, right? It's if you show up, you show up. If you don't, you don't. So I think that's the main difference that was for me.
Yeah, and with that said, what's been like one of the greatest unexpected benefits that you've received from this program? Like, I wasn't expecting to receive this, but I got it somehow.
It's tough.
Huh?
It's tough. I don't know.
Okay. So I guess a better question is, what was the biggest non-weight loss benefit you received from this program?
Just the mental clarity. I feel like I think clearer. I react more efficiently. I think more focused. I think that eliminating certain things that I would, add into my routine on a daily basis would inhibit just, my overall, perspective, thought process, etc. I think actually when I started, one of the main things during the consultation form or going through like what day in the life was Ursula asked you like, when you go out and drink, how many drinks would you say you had? I don't know, 8 to 10 Tato sodas, and you kind of just looked at me with his eyes wide open. He's like, yeah, you can't do that anymore. And I think that's the main thing. I think that drinking is like become such a social norm now. It's a casual like, what are we doing tonight? We're gonna go out. We're gonna have a drink. And it's just like I think that's just the new social norm, and I think that it's I hate to say abused in our culture today, but it's definitely the truth. I think that I don't think people realize what the excessive long-term effects of drinking are for weight loss. Even like if people say, "Oh, I'm drinking clean," I had a Truly or a White Claw or a Tito's Club. No matter what, it slows down your metabolism. I think people know into the science, but I don't think people care until like quote unquote it's too late, right? So that was another thing. But like Mac, I'm a big whiskey guy.
Yeah.
I love my whiskey. I love my scotch. I love doing all the tastings and all that stuff. And it's fine. You can still have your drink and limit yourself and just keep it to a certain capacity and still enjoy yourself. And that was what one of the main things with this program was like that you could still have the things you enjoy in moderation. You just you're learning how to eat again compared to what we've been taught our whole lives. So I could still eat pizza. I could still have a scotch here and there. I could still go to a ball game and eat cheese fries on the fly. But as long as you're doing your work consistently on a day-to-day basis, you can still enjoy everything you want in life, just in moderation.
Absolutely, man. I love that. And that's one of the goals of the program is to teach that. And Anthony, what would you say has been your favorite part of the program so far? Like we've been working together for almost a year. It's been 11 months since you and I have been working together.
To be honest, like just the calls once a month, touch bases, just your flexibility. I think you're really invested in all your clients. And you have a genuine, what's what I'm looking for? You have a genuine relationship with each and every person. And I noticed that through your coaching calls over the past few weeks, like you really take your time to learn each and every person individually, what their kinks are, where they're lacking, and you're able to adjust them on the fly, what they need to do to get to their optimum results. So that's really what's been my favorite part. It's just the relationship fact that you got to have with a coach. There's another individual I follow on a regular basis. His name is Sean Whalen, and I've read his book a few years back, and that was like one of the easiest books, well, the shortest books I've ever read, and it's called How to Make Shit Happen. And in the book, he says it all. He says it like within the first chapter. He says, you could do anything you want, but half the time you don't know how to do it. The first thing you should do is get out and go hire a coach. So anybody can say, yeah, I'm going on a diet. And all I've been doing nonstop is hearing people recently, because summer's around the corner, is jumping on these keto, intermittent fasting, fad diets, and they're starving themselves. They're not eating carbs. They're not eating fats. I'm just looking at them and I'm like, and I say to myself, that sounds great, but to each his own, right? So, I think the people who are willing to invest in themselves and their future, um, I don't look at it as expense. I look at it as a bond and letting it mature over time.
Dude, I love that, man. 100%. And Anthony, to wrap up here, I'd like to ask a couple of questions. One is, what would you say to anybody that might be on the fence about this program, about investing into themselves, having a coach in their corner? And then two is maybe sharing some last wisdom, bits, nuggets that you can leave everybody off with here today.
My advice to anyone who would want to have a coach in the corner.
Maybe they're a little afraid to invest. They're on the fence about it a little bit.
I would say nosedive right in. Again, fear is a state of nervousness only fit for children.
Love that.
And you're in Vegas, baby. Go all in.
My man. All chips, all in, baby. I love it. And then last question here, or I guess just would love to hear from you. Just what would you leave everybody off with as words of wisdom, just a nugget to leave everybody off with here today?
You're never too far away from being who you truly want to be. And nobody cares, just work harder.
Nobody cares, just work harder. Fucking love it. My man. Anthony, thank you, bro. I appreciate the work we've done over the past year. I appreciate you taking some time out to join us here in the interview today. I hope that this was valuable for everyone watching, everyone listening. Thank you all for tuning in. If you found this valuable, please feel free to share it, and we will catch you in our next video. Anthony, thank you again, my man.
Appreciate you, bro.